What's going on, everyone? Today we are going to go over the augments for patch 13.19b. So there was like a medium B patch earlier in the week, but we are going to go over all the good augments, all the bad augments, all the ones you should kind of like avoid or like pretty much auto pick. And we're going to focus more on stage 2, not because stage 3 and 4 are not as important. They definitely are. But during stage 2, that's where like data means a lot more in my opinion, because in stage 3 and stage 4, you pick what's best for your board. Data does kind of lean you in a certain direction, but it's by no means like a big determining factor. But on stage 2, since you're not really like angled into anything quite yet, it often means that there are a lot more opportunities where data actually affects your game. And right now we're in Master Plus, we have around like 600k games there. But if you go to whatever rating you are, so for example, if you are gold, go to gold. We have around like 7 million games there. Always look at the data for your rating because that's going to be the most important thing. Like a lot of people, they just default to Master Plus because that's like the default on most websites, or like Diamond Plus. Some people use Diamond Plus, but always pick the one that you are, because different strategies work at different ratings at like different effectiveness based on skill level and things like that. But we're going to focus more on Master Plus, and you may have noticed a pattern already. So a lot of the top augments, they're all trait augments. So by default, trait augments are always going to be bumped up a little bit more than every other augment. You may be wondering why. So according to Riot, I want to give a different example. All the legend augments, so for example, let's type in job well done. All these are Ornn augments, and they want them to average below average because they want these to be suboptimal. These are for the stage 3 and stage 4 ones. But what that means is that for all the trait augments, you only pick trait augments if you are already going that trait. So by default, trait augments are always going to be slightly above average in theory. Obviously, it does not always work out in that case. And sometimes they are averaging 3.71 like Vampiric Blades, which is obviously ridiculously high. And then I guarantee you at the bottom, there are going to be some doo-doo ones down here that are trait related as well. For example, apparently defensive dash is really awful right now. Multicaster Soul has been awful for like a couple different patches now. Targon Heart, same thing. But normally these trait related augments, they perform however well the comp is doing, but a tiny little bit better than that, because obviously if you're forcing a trait, let's say you're going like all in Shurima, if you get the augment for +1 Shurima, like obviously it's like one of the best ones you're gonna get, because those are the only situations you would ever take that. Whereas if you compare that to different augments such as let's say Cybernetic Leech, this augment works in a bunch of different comps, so this one should be averaging lower than the average trait augment if the game is balanced correctly. Big caveat there, but that's just something to keep in mind. So at the top, it typically is going to be trait augments, and sometimes when a comp is broken, you just tunnel into that comp, and you could do that starting at stage 2. So let's look at stage 2 average placement. We have Ionia Crest, Rogue Crown, Vampiric Blades, Bruiser Crown. Lucky Gloves is doing really well right now. That's the first non-trait related augment that we see so far. But then the next, like Ionia Crown, Noxus Crest, Titanic Strength, Petricite Shackles, all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9 of the top 10 are all trait related. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Obviously the one after that is Tiny Titans, but if we look at all these comps, so Ionia, Rogue, Bruiser, and Noxus and Vanquisher, and we scroll down a bit here, like most of those are going to be the top comps. So Ionia is really good for Ashe reroll. It makes Ashe reroll like one of the best comps ever. Vanquishers obviously use the Ionia. There was a Vanquisher thing over here as well. And Rogue is there. Bruiser's good for Cho'Gath because you get to 6 Bruisers really easily. The only one that isn't in the S tier right now is Petricite Shackles and Noxus Crest. But obviously Noxus is one of those comps which just like gets bumped up really hard whenever you get a +1. Same goes for a comp like Void. Void is really good if you ever get +1 Void. But those are some of the good trait augments to keep in mind right now. Tiniest Titan, people often do really well with this whenever they go for like Piltover or something like that. I know Piltover did get nerfed a little bit, but if you have the best like life-saving or like econ augment in the game, it's gonna work really well with Piltover, right? Golden Ticket, really good because of Cho'Gath. Notice here, the earlier you pick Golden Ticket, the better it is. There are always these little patterns whenever you look at certain augments. Golden Ticket is definitely one of them. If you pick it at stage 2, you get a 4.11. Stage 3, 4.34. Stage 4, 4.72. So you definitely want to take this as early as you can. Compare that to something like Titanic Strength, which is just like all around good right now. It's pretty much the same at all stages. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind whenever you're looking at augments. Always look based on what stage you're in. So like average placement overall, it is pretty useful to kind of just know the general whereabouts, but knowing the general placement of where it is on each stage is even more important because, for example, the golden ticket thing, that has very big implications. It goes from like a or even S tier augment all the way to like a B or C tier augment based on what stage you take it in. So that's like a very important thing to kind of keep in mind. And if you want to like look at stuff, this is available on a website, teamfight.lol. Go check that out if you want to kind of play around with this, or if you want to like see whichever rating you're actually at, because all in all, it's pretty useful. Data does not decide everything, by the way. It's just something that you could kind of use to enhance whatever you're doing. A lot of the top players, they don't even look at data because let's say you're like top 10 or top 100 challenger or something like that. Master Plus data isn't that useful for you. And a lot of sites, they don't have GM Plus or Challenger Plus because the sample size is too small. This whole like 600 over here, that's already like the bare minimum sample size in my opinion, because sometimes you get some goofy results if you have anything less than this. So a lot of the top players, they don't even use data when they play. They just use like what they feel or they just use their brain during the game. So God forbid we do that. I try not to do that as much as possible. I use data pretty often. You guys can see if you watch my streams, like whenever an augment selection comes up, I'm like looking at my other monitor, typing really furiously. And sometimes I pick my augments that way. But oftentimes I only do that during stage 2 because during stage 3 and 4, you have to tailor it to your team. You know, like let's say I'm going for an Ionia comp and I see, let's see what the best one is over here. Vampiric Blades. Like obviously I wouldn't pick Vampiric Blades if I'm going the Ionia comp, right? Because that just would not make any sense. But all in all, that's kind of like what you kind of could do whenever you are looking at stats. Looking at some of the other ones, like all the Ionia related ones are really good. Sentinel Spirit's really high up there. Stationary support, I'm actually kind of surprised by this one. This one, you have to wait for 8-player combats to get a support item. It works really similarly to Ornn's Forge, but you also get the bonus of the training dummy at the start, which is pretty good. And for a silver augment, getting you a training dummy and a support item later, that is incredible value. I remember there was I believe it was a gold augment that gave you 2 training dummies, and that is a big difference. Let's compare stationary support with a different augment called Escort Quest. So we have Escort Quest here. This is a gold augment. You gain a training dummy, and each round, if it survives, you get 3 gold. So obviously, you both get a training dummy, and obviously one is silver, one is gold. So you wouldn't compare the two normally because you can't pick them both at the same time. However, you could see the power already, where both of them give you a training dummy, but one of them gives you a support item later on, guaranteed for like a lower tier compared to this one, which I think is like a pretty big power discrepancy. You have like an average augment versus something that's like very well above average. I'd say that anything better than like a 4.2, 4.25 is generally considered like, yeah, you probably want to take those, you know, and anything below like 4.0 is like insta pick in my opinion, because like no matter what, like even if you have an awful board for it, like you could just hard force it and probably like average like a 4.2 or something. But in the situations where it's really good, you're probably averaging even better than a 3.6. You're probably averaging like a 3.4, 3.5, which is absolutely insane. If you go 3.5 every single game out of 8 players, you're going to be climbing a lot. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. One surprise to me was Demon Flare. Not too many people have played around with Demon Flare that much in like the last set. It really only saw some play, I believe, recently. So to play this build, you just want to play like a 6 Sorc build. So if we go here and we go to Sorcerers, we could click this. And you could play something similar to this, or you can make some substitutions instead. For example, you could take a Caston and put in someone else. You could do something like a Noxus build with Mordekaiser and Cassiopeia, I believe. So we could add Mordekaiser in there. Cassiopeia, where is she? She could be over here. It could also be Darius as well. Like the last Noxus doesn't really matter that much. But there are a lot of different options to kind of like play around with this build, and very, very solid. Items would be a little bit different. You wouldn't run these items on him if you do have Demon Flare. Instead, what you probably want is like a Titans. You could do something like a Stone Plate maybe. You could also do something like an Archangel Staff. Archangels is also pretty good because you want him to live like a really long time. But you don't have to do Stone Plate. I've even seen Bloodthirster on him. I'm not sure how well this one actually is. I just see people build it a lot, but I have not tested it myself personally. But if other people are doing it, there's definitely something to be said about it. But let's go back into the other augments down here and other ones to kind of look out for. You can see some of the other trait ones sliding in right now. Gunners are pretty solid. We have the Gunner Crown here. Sorcerer's pretty solid if you get the prismatic version of it. Scope weapons is almost required for some champions. For example, Mordekaiser and Nyla just become absolute monsters whenever they have this. Freaky Friday is one of my favorite augments because you just get 2 Ornn items, which is huge value. Obviously, one of them's a little bit delayed, but you know, it's something that you could kind of work around. Scrolling down a little bit, Caretaker's Chosen. This one I don't really like personally, but if you are in favor of using Bard, it's obviously pretty good. You do eventually get a Radiant item plus everything else, and normally with a Prismatic Augment, you just get 1 Radiant item, but you get it right away, so it is a little bit different. But yeah, Caretaker's Chosen, definitely very powerful. Buried Treasures gives you a ton of items. The only thing I don't like about this is that if you pick this and you want to try to win streak, it's going to be almost impossible to, because you get like a very delayed reward. Normally, if you're like not sure if you're streaking or not, let's say you go like win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. Obviously, you never want to go win, lose, but Buried Treasures is pretty good in those situations where you're like not sure if you can win everything, not sure if you could lose everything. Shopping Spree, this one's okay. It's good for like all the reroll comps right now, but once reroll is donezo, like yeah, I wouldn't really do this. Another thing you can use Shopping Spree for is going for 4 costs. Like you don't always have to reroll with this, but if you do go for 4 costs, you just have to power level up really big or really quickly, and then just roll everything down as fast as you can. That's one way that you could use Shopping Spree, which honestly might be the better way to use it right now because a lot of the 4 cost comp are really powerful. Like generally Shopping Spree, you use it either for rushing for 4 costs or doing 3 cost reroll. It's not really good for 1 or 2 cost reroll, because you get the benefit when you level up, and if you're staying low level because you're doing 1 cost reroll, not going to get much value from it. But 3 costs or 4 costs, that's kind of the comps you want to use when you go for Shopping Spree. Speaking of win, lose from before, Inconsistency is the only augment you want to do that with. Just like an overall very good value augment, you get like a ton of gold from this. Binary Airdrop, pretty solid because they kind of changed the logic from it, I believe, recently, so it's been doing pretty well. The Boss Set, maybe we need to make a comp for this. That pretty much summarizes most of like the really good ones that you kind of want to look at pretty seriously right now. Around like the 4.3 to 4.5 range, that's when you're like, maybe I could reroll for something better. Or it's like, my comp's good for this one. Let's say you're going Gunners and you see Gunner Heart, it's a 4.37, like obviously go for it. Another thing to look at is if you get like Blood Money, for example, and you're like trying to win streak, obviously do not take it because this is for lose streaking. But if you have like a great lose streak start or like a Piltover start, auto pick Blood Money. You'll average like really highly with it. Opposite can be said with Spoils of War. You can only take this if you're win streaking quite a bit. Same with like a Cut Above. You want to kill stuff with it. A Cut Above you typically want to only take if you have a attack damage champion that is 2-star, because they need to be killing stuff for you to get benefits from it. But let's look at some of the bad ones. Let's scroll down a little bit. Try to find some of the ones you want to avoid. Holy cow, there's one that's a 5.5 right now. That is really, 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 really bad. Wow, okay. Personally, I didn't even know you could get this on stage 2, but yeah, I would kind of, yeah, if it's averaging 5.5, I don't care what type of start you have. You probably don't want to be picking it. Everything that's below a 5, I automatically don't pick at the start of the game. So let's go over them. Target Heart, yeah, that makes sense. Multicaster Soul, no one's playing multicasters. Tactician's Tools is a little surprising. They were thinking about buffing this pretty heavily, but they never went through with it. Cybernetic Leech, I feel like, I don't know if this is like a skill gap or something like that. I guess Leech isn't that useful early. You could see as it goes on and on, Cybernetic Leech becomes better and better. Let's compare all the cybernetics for a moment because there's going to be some interesting patterns. I believe bulk is pretty stable throughout. Yeah, we have a 4.46, 4.39, 4.4, 4.67, 4.75, 4.55. The other bulk one is down here, 4.8, 4.63, 4.44. So there is some variation, but all in all, it's like not like that big of a difference in my opinion. But I guarantee you, like Leech, it's definitely going to have a consistent pattern of getting better as the game goes on. Like this one starts at a 4.7, 4.6, 4.4, 4.75, 4.4, 4.3, 5.17, 4.73, 4.38. And that's just because like as the game goes on, units deal more damage and you could actually make use of the Omnivamp. Whereas bulk, it's just like, you just get health. So honestly, I'm surprised bulk isn't better in the early game. It seems to be kind of like a varying pattern from what we've been looking at. But just one thing to know about Leech is kind of that. It's like, in the beginning, it's pretty bad because you don't really need lifesteal at the start of the game. Okay, next one's up we have is Indomitable Will. This one gives you a Quicksilver, or it like sheds effects, and this one is the same thing as Leech, gets better as the game goes on because your carries really make use of it later. Ixtal Hearts, I guess it's kind of hard to know what the Ixtal kind of is and play around it. So maybe that's why it's not that good in the early game. Infusion, this one, I think it's more for sorcerers, but there might be better ones to take right now. I'm actually surprised it's this low. Maybe people are taking it in the wrong comps. That would be my guess right now. Social distancing, they nerfed this one earlier, and you don't really need the stats at the beginning. Perfected repetition, multicaster is just not a thing right now. Total domination. This one I'm surprised about, but I guess the Noxus comps aren't really performing that well. Let me do a different check. So I'm gonna go to the traits. We're gonna type in Noxus, and surprisingly, Noxus is doing pretty well. We see like, obviously 9 Noxus is absolutely insane because it's so hard to get, so ignore that one for now, but like the most popular one is gonna be 3 Noxus, 4.26, 5 is a 5.07, and then 7 is a 4.19. So if you average these threes out at the bottom, it's probably gonna be above average. So it does surprise me that total domination is that low, but I guess the spatulas are more important. For example, like Noxus Crest was one of the best augments, but total domination a little weak right now. Invoker Crown, Invoker's more of like a support trait in my opinion, unless you just go all in on Invokers. There's no really good user of Invoker, so I don't really like that one. Data seems to agree. Harm Assist, healing gets better as the game goes on, so don't pick that early. Same thing as before. Defensive Dash, Challengers are just not that good right now, so you see the Challenger Heart here too. Stellacorn's Blessing, that one's the Targon one. And yeah, obviously all the other Targon ones are bad. So you can see a pattern already. Like the bad traits, they're all grouped up at the bottom. We see like other Juggernaut ones, Invoker, Strategist over here. Pretty much all the like bad traits are just at the bottom, right? So we're gonna skip over those. Let's look at Spoils of War. Spoils of War, you might be wondering why that one's bad. Well, for a Prismatic Augment, Spoils of War is very difficult to kind of play around because you get benefits as you kill units. And how do you kill units if someone has like a Prismatic Augment like starter kit, for example? They get a 2-star tier 1 champion and a 4 cost. Like you're not beating that with your level 3 board or level 4 board with Spoils of War, right? So this one makes it really hard to get the reward from. Compare that to the silver augment of Spoils of War, which was near like, I think it was a 4.41 or something like that. That one's obviously going to be better because you could get more procs from it, because at silver, other people don't get as much power. Let's look at some other ones. Rich Get Richer has been pretty weak for a while, so I would kind of ignore that. Wandering Trainer, I feel like this one might be a skill issue. It's averaging like a 4.83 right now, or 4.84, because this is obviously a bug. I think people are dying at stage 3, so they don't see their third augment. So that's why it's kind of showing up there. But we'll try to fix that in the future. Wandering Trainer, I feel like it's really risky, but also if you actually know how to play all the scenarios, there must be a way to get this average higher. And so this one, it might be low on the list because it's like definitely a skill issue, like definitely for me too, because very hard to play around unless you get super lucky. I'm actually curious, do you think Wandering Trainer gets a lower placement if we switch this to gold? I'd have to guess yes, but let's kind of check it out. It actually improves. That is wild to me. I feel like this augment should get better as you get better. The only explanation is maybe someone just tries to tunnel into a comp and you get to like a certain power level or something like that that's just like acceptable, but maybe at lower levels it's like good enough. You don't have to use all 3 of the traits that well. Maybe that's like kind of the logic there. Let's check maybe like Diamond or something. Diamond is 4.68. What was Platinum? Platinum is 4.59. It actually gets better as you get worse. Wow, okay, that's very surprising to me, because this is one of those augments where I think it would get better as you get better, but I was wrong on that. I'm not right all the time, you know, but that was kind of my instinct, so to speak. But let's look at any other stragglers at the bottom that we should try to avoid right now. Obviously, again, you have to tailor it to your rating. So if you saw this and I say that Wandering Trainer sucks, but you are in gold, apparently it's averaging 4.5 or something like that, so it's not that bad to take. Let's look at some other ones. Build difference pretty important. 4.78 for the prismatic one. Where's the other one? The gold one's a 4.63, so probably want to stay away from build different right now. Shurima, vertical Shurima is not really the way to play Azir right now, but that one's like kind of in the middle. Let's go back towards the bottom. It's mainly trait related ones, Cybernetic Leech, and then some of the really random ones. So that's going to be the ones to try to avoid in this week. And obviously, it's probably going to be the ones to avoid for some of the future. You just have to know which traits are good or bad. And you can get that from looking at the meta snapshot. But Spoils of War, unless they really buff this, for example, it's always going to be pretty bad. But next week, should we look at maybe some of the stage 3 and 4 augments, or should we stick to looking at the stage 2? Let me know down in the comments, because I definitely want to continue like one augment video every patch, just so we kind of get a rundown to see like what's super broken, what's like super bad, and try to like avoid those. Maybe we do like a legend thing later on. I don't really know, but they kind of hide the legend augments a little bit because they don't want people always picking the same legend as everyone else. But let me know what you thought about this video. Let me know if you are going to be using data for picking augments. Let me know if you're going to try to avoid it. But overall, I think it's like pretty decent to use. Obviously, don't use it as your sole decision point unless you just really want to not play the game. But I think like using brain trains you over time. What you should do probably is like pick your augment without looking at the data, and then afterwards look at the replay and then look at the data and see if you made the quote unquote right decision. And you could always like mix and match what you saw. So for example, if like you see, let's say you picked an augment that was like a 4.5 and you had like a 4.2 available, but you could argue like, hey, I had a really good board for this 4.5 augment, so it would have been better no matter what. That's kind of like a good way to like think about your gameplay and try to improve over time. But that's gonna be it for me today. Hope to see you all next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.